Well, I'm sitting with Cameron Strang of the Relevant Media Empire, and it's great to have you in the hot seat here at the gathering. Now, there were some that say the guy is terminally young, 20-something, and either A, it's because he's focusing on this age group, or he's taken something, or it's something else. What is it? I mean, you can tell me now.
I'm 38 now. I'm not young anymore.
Holy cow. Well, you stay very focused on this millennial generation, so it's my hope to get a little bit of background. You started Relevant Media, but you have a whole family in publishing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up in publishing. My dad is Steve Strang. My mom, Joy Strang. They own, they started Charisma magazine and now have a large publishing company. It started the same right within a few months of me being born. So I really grew up with publishing and grew up in the industry, seeing the world that they cover, which is more the charismatic stream, and then kind of figuring out my place in all this and what God was calling me to do. When I was in college, I kind of got a vision for making media for my generation, and I, because of my background, had known the power of the press, and our dinner table was kind of their daily wrap-up meeting, because my mom ran the financial side, my dad ran the product side, and that was kind of their touch point. So I'm sitting here listening. I got a business degree as an 8-year-old, and so when God birthed a vision in my heart when I was 19 to make media for my generation, I knew that it was possible, but at the same time, I came home and told my parents, hey, what about doing something like this? What if I did something like this? And my dad said, if that was a viable audience, somebody would already be doing it. And they really pushed me. And almost
that was calculated on his part.
I really do. I hope it is. I hope it wasn't just being mean. No, it's like to kind of prove them wrong, almost out of spite. I wanted to show them that no, this is possible, and so I'd work on it for a year, and I'd come back from college the next summer and had fleshed out what about this, or I could do it this way, and then they'd push me and say, well, I see what you're saying, but you haven't factored in postage rates, you haven't factored in this and that, and they really were pushing me that if God was really calling me to do this, that I need to take my time and lay a strong foundation and really think this through. It took me 8 years to launch the magazine, from when I first got the idea and said, this is what I'm going to do with my life, till the time print magazine came out. 8 years is a long time when you're somebody who's wired to just want to do it tomorrow. Oh, God said, do it, And so it was through that period of refinement, of laying down dreams, of questioning if I heard God, of learning the craft, and getting into debt, that we were able to finally pull it off. And now it's been 14 years. 2000 was when we launched the company.
You obviously keep a keen eye on millennials. How has that changed your publishing habits?
Well, media is radically different. Our company in the last 2 years has transformed. It was around 2011, I got bored. It'd been a decade. We accomplished what we set out to accomplish. And I just thought, I'm in my mid-30s, and am I supposed to just maintain this for the rest of my life? I mean, we weren't growing exponentially like you do in the earliest days. We're kind of treading water for 3 or 4 years. We were speaking to the same audience. We were, I was just feeling restless. And in that period, unsolicited, a couple people came and sniffed around to see if I'd be interested in selling the company. And because the audience we reach is an audience that other companies can't or don't. And so that's attractive. I understand that.
What would you have done if you had sold? I mean, what did you already have an idea?
Well, that was the thing. I just was prayerfully open to it. Maybe my calling was to bring it this far, and somebody else could take it to a greater impact. I'm actually a fairly bad businessman. I'm more impact minded than I am profit minded, and so if as a steward of this thing, it is ultimately my job to hand it off to somebody who can increase the impact, then I will. And God's not surprised by anything, and I believe He orders our steps. And even though I wouldn't have seen that transition coming, He wouldn't have been surprised by it, and He would have had a new path for me, and I just need to prayerfully pursue it. So I was really open to laying the company down or handing it off in 2011. And in that process, God birthed a new dream in me, and kind of like for the next 10 years. And it was interesting because it was coinciding with how media was changing.
Right.
And I really felt like for the first 10 years we were known as Relevant Magazine, and that moving forward intentionally we were to pursue being multi-platform and being relevant, not Relevant Magazine. And so, for the first 10 years, it was all about funneling people to ultimately buy a print magazine. And a generation was coming up of kind of pick and choose your media that would never pay to have paper mailed to a location. And so it'd be really silly for us to kind of plant our flag in one
Especially
platform.
when it's the relevant flag,
Right.
A relevant.
Right. An audience that needs to be, we need to be on the front edge of where, an audience, changing habits of how audiences are interacting with media on an independent budget. I mean, we're a small company. And so really wrestled with how do we, I was asking the question, I was praying through like, okay, what was the dream in me? I felt like we weren't supposed to be talking to a niche audience. I felt like God called us to make a national impact. At that time, if July of 2012, when we added up all the humans that interacted with our content, so print magazine, podcast, website, all of the people we can track, it was about 700,000 people. Nothing to sneeze at, but it was the same kind of number. And I was just like asking the question, like, what would it look like if we were reaching 10 million? What would we be doing then that we're not doing now? And well, if there was an answer to that, well, it's probably not 10 million people reading words on paper, or even on a screen. So what are we doing in video? What are we doing in audio? What are we doing to reach people on whatever platform they want to engage us on? If they're a sight and sound generation, or what are we doing in that space, or are we going to lose them? And so I felt like through that process, God birthed some very clear dreams and things that we needed to change. And so we shuttered a ton of stuff we were doing, stuff that was profitable, but was maybe spreading us too thin. And it was keeping us from being able to really pursue, growth and through relevant. And so we went from a staff of 30-ish to a staff of 11. And I didn't want to cut that deep, but once like that ball, it was a hard year. It was a really hard year. And, but we changed things, and we launched our iPad magazine. We launched video strategy through our YouTube channel and others. We changed some things about our podcast. We blew up our website and launched a totally new web publishing platform. July of 2012 was 700,000 people. July of 2014, we reached, by the same metric, 17.3 million people. We crossed 10 million in January, and since January to July, it went from 10 to 17. And it's the same size staff. We have maybe like 15, 17 people on staff, and the revenue is about the same, but how people are engaging us is totally different. And I'm platform agnostic now. I don't care, because I want hearts and minds. And if you're going to read an article on our website and post on your Facebook, and it's going to start a dialogue with your friends, and I never get a dime from any of you, okay, because we reached you, and that's what's most important. So our business has changed, and because we're small, we've been like a little speed ship or speedboat that can like quickly turn. Some of the big kind of traditional publishing companies are having a harder time because they have a lot invested in kind of like, this is how we do what we do. And to turn 10 degrees is a major shift for them. So we're able to experiment, and a lot of stuff that we've done has failed, but we do it once or twice, and then we look at data, see that isn't connecting, and we do something else,
As someone that reads the magazine and also looks at the podcast, et cetera, you do change. I mean, I even noticed that just even within the year, number of things constantly happening, and I'm going to guess it's based on what you're hearing from your readers.
We've been kind of a startup mindset, even though we've been doing it 14 years, and startups are birthed out of like gut, hustle and gut instinct. And that's how I led and still do largely. But one of the things we've tried to change in our team is like latching onto data and analytics and listening to our audience. And in 2011-12, we really started using data that we could get from the website, surveying our audience, getting feedback, and listening to it, and then using that data to make better decisions. And so we will test now. We'll test different options of something on the website. We'll see which one connects. And again, if it's about mission and impact, and it doesn't change the message of what we're trying to say, it's just kind of a interface or a subject line or something like that, why would we not be wise and use data and testing? So it's not to hawk a product or anything like that. It's really to get more people or make the content more accessible to more people so we can reach them for Christ.
Let's talk a little bit about this audience, this millennial audience. I've heard various descriptions. Mike, I have two children and one moving toward that who are right in the meat of this generation. Justice generation, I hear that described, and certainly hear anecdotes concerning that. I also hear this is the clicktivistic. This is clicktivism on parade. As well. You like it, and then you somehow have done your thing to eliminate Joseph Kony or any number of other causes that are invading our space. Which one is it?
Yeah, so they care about justice. One of the things about our audience that is the most frustrating is they're passionate, but they're in some respects lazy, and so. If we poll our audience and we categorically, topically ask them, what are the things you'd like to see Relevant cover more? Or what are the things that are most important to you topically? The number one thing, above Jesus, the number one thing is social justice.
Above Jesus.
Yeah, number one thing. And we're like, well, great. So we had a side magazine, we launched a thing called Reject Apathy. It's in every issue of Relevant. It's a standalone. We know because of analytics that if on our website we'll publish an article, just every day we're publishing new articles. So let's say we publish an article on something about 20-something life. It'll get 200,000 reads. It'll get shared 20,000 times. Okay, if I publish anything about social justice, a current event, anything about social justice, it might get 10,000 reads and 100 shares. So they say it's the most important thing, but they don't even read it. They don't, not let alone give or engage. They don't even click to read it. And it's the same style of headline. It's the same style of graphics. It's not like treated differently. They want to know it's there. They like us more because we talk about that stuff, but it's not the stuff they actually engage. That's why hashtag activism is so popular, because I can, with a hashtag, kind of like check, I did something. And it's quick and easy, and it doesn't really require sacrifice from me or a long-term commitment or relationship or engagement. And I can kind of feel good about I did something.
Knowing you, that obviously can't sit well with what your mission and vision is. Yeah. How do you get beyond that?
That is the nut we are determined to crack. We are trying everything we can to see what will resonate. It's human nature in some respects to say it's amazing what the Passion Conference can do at one event, raising however many millions for, sex trafficking. It's amazing. So this audience will give and will engage. But after they left that and after the hashtag ended, what are they still doing? And that's not Louis Giglio's fault at all. It's amazing that he's making it an issue and rallying them around a cause that can actually make a difference. But what's the ongoing engagement? That's the thing I'm trying, because they don't go to Passion every day, but they could read our website every day. So I'm trying to figure out, and we'll continue to figure out, what is the thing that we can do to engage this generation in a long-term way. It's interesting in millennials, the audience we reach, 90% of our readers are between 18 and 39. And millennials are, 15 to 33 right now, So we're very much a millennial readership. It's interesting for us in the last decade to have seen them coming in, when they go to college, their eyes are open to issues. They have the zeal and the passion. They don't have money or resources, but they have energy. And so instead of, you're in college, instead of starting a band, they started a 501c3 or something, And, it's kind of hubris that they don't look to the organizations that have been there doing that for 20 years. They can do it themselves. And then they find out after a period of time that it's tough for one person to actually make a difference. Oh, well, it didn't work out the way they thought. And they tried their heart. And then, so they'll go get a career, and then all of a sudden, they know too much. They know that, me giving doesn't actually make a difference, or me volunteering doesn't actually make a difference. And so they kind of have an apathy, not of ignorance, but an apathy of almost knowing too much. And so they're skeptical. They'll sit on the sidelines because they don't like how the organization uses the funds, or there's not quite enough transparency. So I'll sit on the sidelines rather than engage at all. And so there's this so in the course of a decade, you go from zeal and without wisdom to wisdom without any activity, wisdom and apathy almost. So when we talk about justice and we talk about what Jesus would be about, hands and feet, it's two different audiences that we're talking to within the same audience. And that's something that we have to continually chip away at, both of them. So.
You often take on very serious subjects, often very light subjects as well, as you stated. What are some of the, if you're thinking a little bit prophetically here, what is Relevant going to be tackling here in the next 2 to 3 years? What do you see coming down the pike?
Well, hopefully, God continues to speak and open our eyes to things, and we respond. This year, thanks to you, over the last several years, me personally, I've been engaged in the issue of peacemaking in the Holy Land. And like any substantial issue that has people on both sides, believers on both sides of an issue, we took our time to talk about it because it needed to be vetted. It needed to be prayerfully vetted by people who are far wiser than us. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, we worked on an article that we finally deployed this spring about the Holy Land. And I'm proud of it. It espoused a third way of peacemaking.
Describe that. What is this third way?
There's traditionally in the church world, there's been kind of one ideology that's been taught. I grew up under it, that, Scripture says, those who bless Israel, the Lord will bless. You stand with Israel. There are people who have started asking the question about the modern state of Israel, the secular government of Israel versus the biblical children of God, Israel, the theology of what, when Jesus factored into the equation, and what did that change? And then looking at the reality of the Christian church in the region and our call as Christians to support the church. And a lot of the churches in the Palestinian territories, and they're not Jews, they are Arabs, but they're Christians. And so what are we supposed to do? So all of a sudden, as you start to really kind of learn about the area, and as a Christian and your worldview start to think like, what does the Scripture say, and how do we apply that in the modern world? You ask questions, and really what it comes down to for us was Christ's teaching about blessed are the peacemakers, and that we should be known as a people of peace, not picking sides and creating more division. What can we do to support the Palestinian people, especially the work of the church in that territory? What can we do to stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters and support the land of Israel and support peacemaking in the midst of it? That's what the article tackles. And we really do espouse a third way of thinking. It's not just partisan politics where you're on one side of the aisle pointing at the other side, but it really is having relationship and understanding with both sides and saying, what would God be calling us to do in the midst of this? It's a nuanced issue. It's a hot button issue, and we took our time with it. So to answer your question, there are a number of other hot button issues that are absolutely things that we, our generation, need to talk about. Sexuality in and faith, sexuality in the church, marriage, not just marriage as far as gay marriage versus heterosexual marriage, but the institution of marriage. The fact that our parents' generation, we can look to that and see that, divorce was prevalent. I think 65% of millennials were raised by a single parent household at one point. Then let's chart a different path. Well, the reality is millennials are getting married later. That's not necessarily a good thing because they're cohabitating. Even Christians are cohabitating far more. They're skeptical of the institution of marriage. And the ones that do marry are actually divorcing at the exact same rate as their parents' generation. We're getting early numbers on that. So it's an epidemic that isn't solved just because we went through and saw a broken model. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about how, as the church, to be people who welcome the broken and the hurting and not be known or perceived as being judgmental hypocrites. we as a generation emerging can hopefully chart a slightly different course than what culture has seen in recent decades. And so those are some of the things that we are prayerfully and mindfully kind of like roads we're going down, and we are also in no rush. There's a permanency to print that I am very cognizant of. And the last thing that I want to do is be wrong in the light of eternity. I don't want to look back and regret something we published that somebody can point to a decade later. And so we're in no rush. We will take our time and get it right, whatever the issue is that God's put on our heart to talk about.
With all of this, how do you remain fresh?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I've always been successful at it. I surround myself with people who are plugged in and energetic. Our entire small team is the target audience of who we're trying to reach. The team that I've surrounded myself with, if I can say I've done one thing pretty well over the 14 years, I've hired well. I've found really good talent, people who are passionate, people who are driven to be part of something bigger than themselves. Very few egos, and people that like you want to link arms with and they want to make a difference. And so just the team, energizes me personally. But I've also, owning a small business and trying to grow a small business, I made a lot of mistakes of having my fingers in too many cookie jars. And you kind of have that, again, startup hustle mindset. And then all of a sudden you realize you work 18 hours today. And so, in this new season of my life, I've really put a lot of margin in. I actually took a sabbatical last fall, an open-ended sabbatical. It ended up being almost 4 months.
You may not come back.
I may not come back anytime soon. I figured I'd come back at some point. But I just was like, my team rallied around me and they're like, yeah, we got this. And when I came back, the company had grown. And so that's a little humbling, that maybe I don't need to have my fingers in all the cookie jars. There's an absence of leadership that they stepped into, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And when I came back part-time. I have a 4.5-year-old son. I pick him up from preschool almost every day and spend the afternoons with him, and came back part-time. I'm full-time now. But for like another 6 months, I was part-time. And so that margin allowed me to kind of recalibrate. And when I came back from my sabbatical, I didn't come back to my old job. So my time is focused on the missional impact stuff that we're doing. And I have an amazing team around me who runs the organization, runs the business. I'm still the president, but I try to intentionally remove myself from the day-to-day stuff that other people are more than capable to make good decisions, And so I'm focused on plugging in with our creative team and our editorial team, talk about what is God calling us to do and say, and how are we going to say it, and what are we doing to make a difference. That's my everyday, and I'm energized. I was running on fumes for a while, but I'm back.
Well, your passion is contagious, and we're just delighted that you could join us today. Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks for having me.